All right, it's time for one of my least favorite things to do, believe it or not, here on the channel, but I know you guys love it. So here you go, an updated top 25. Now, I hate doing these things. You guys love them. So the best I can do, I put out 3 of these every offseason. That's it. I know a lot of these bigger websites or whatever, some of the corporate people, they got people that seemingly put out updated top 25s almost every single week or whatever. To me, that's just pointless. I only do 3 off-season top 25 rankings. I do one after the February signing day, which, of course, I already did back in February. I do a second one, the one you're watching right now, after spring practices and the transfer portal window is basically closed. And then I do a third one sort of 3-4 weeks before the season starts, usually like end of July, beginning of August. It's like my final preseason top 25 ranking. They don't change a whole lot in the off season, but as I learn more about the teams as the off season goes by, of course we get signing day, so you're adding players. You have the early transfer portal in January that's factored into that February top 25 that I do, and then the one that I'm doing today, you get to see some of these teams play their spring games, which there's a big debate all the time about how much you can actually gain from watching a spring game. I think there are some things you can gain from certain teams, and then you have the off season and, hopefully no injuries in like summer camps or fall practice or whatever. But we've all been watching football a long time. We know, it's bound to happen to somebody somewhere. So I update it again kind of 3 or 4 weeks before the season starts. And as my thoughts sort of evolve over time on these various teams, that gets reflected in my top 25 ranking. Now, like every top 25 ranking I do, even the ones I put out during the season, this is not a projection. I'm not making a top 25 based on how I think the season will end. In other words, if I've got whatever SEC team right now ranked the highest, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm predicting that team to win the SEC. If I've got whatever Big Ten team ranked the highest, not necessarily predicting that team to win the Big Ten. My top 25s are not predictions. My top 25s are snapshots of how I feel about the teams right now when I'm doing it. So with that being said, here we go. Here's the updated top 25. The old top 25. We'll put the new top 25. We'll put the new top 25 right here. How about that? And we'll put the old top 25 right here. And the reason I'm doing that is so when I'm editing this video, I know where to put each one. But anyway, that way you can see what has changed in my mind from basically February till now. Now, my top 5 teams stayed the same. There has been a slight change in the order. So I've got Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Texas 3, Oregon 4, Notre Dame 5. You can see from the previous top 25 that there's been some shuffling in the 1, 2, and 3 position. I have taken Ohio State from 3 to 1, and I've taken Texas from 1 to 3. Now, does this mean that I somehow now think Texas is a bad team? No, I've got them ranked 3rd. I have been saying every time anybody has asked me all offseason, really since last season ended and you sort of knew who was going to the NFL and who was coming back, that in my mind, the 3 top teams heading into 2024 are probably going to be Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas in whatever order you want to put them in. I wouldn't really argue with anybody who wanted to put Georgia, Texas, or Ohio State number 1 or 2 or 3. If you've got anybody else other than those 3 teams at number 1, then I would probably want some sort of explanation from you as to why. And again, this is not a projection. I'm not projecting Ohio State to win the Natty because I've got them ranked number 1. I'm not projecting them to beat Georgia in the Natty game because I've got Georgia too. Now, Georgia and Ohio State are the 2 betting favorites to win the national championship, but betting favorites don't always win games. We see that all the time. Upsets happen in college football, and the reason it's an upset is because the team that Vegas picked to win didn't win. So we see it all the time. And I'm not just going by the Vegas odds. I mean, Georgia is actually the favorite to win the national title. They've got better odds right now than Ohio State. I've got Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Texas 3. So basically, I flip-flopped Ohio State and Texas. Now, why did I do that? I've got questions about all 3 of these teams that I've got ranked in the top 3. I don't think there's a perfect team heading into next season. I don't think there's a team that you can say with over 50% confidence is winning the national title. Now, I know in the world of fanaticism, and that's what a fan is a fanatic. Fan is short for fanatic. You may think especially if you're an Ohio State, a Georgia, or a Texas fan, you may think we're definitely winning it all this year. You might not be crazy to say that, but I honestly don't believe that any of these three teams has over a 50% chance of winning it all. I would not be shocked to see any of those three teams win it. But I don't know if it's over a 50% chance. I've got questions about all three. Start with Ohio State. It's the quarterback position is number one, right? They lose their starting quarterback from last year. Now, he entered the portal. I thought it was a disappointing season for him at QB, especially compared to previous quarterbacks we've seen at Ohio State really over the last decade, going back to Urban Meyer's entire tenure there and on through Ryan Day. Did not live up to the Ohio State expectation in terms of quarterback play. My question is, you bring in Will Howard, is he going to live up to it? I don't think so. We've seen Will Howard play a lot of football, and he's good. Is he great? That remains to be seen. Now, obviously, he's going to have a ton more to work with at Ohio State than anywhere else he's ever played in his entire life. Their wide receiver room is ridiculous. They've got amazing running backs. They added to that through the portal with the addition of Quinshon Judkins. They're going to be a great offense, at least on the outside of the wide receiver position. That's not breaking news, and they've got good running backs. Defensively, huge improvement at Ohio State over the last couple of years. I mean, they were a top 5, top 10 defense by almost every single metric last year, and that's a vast improvement over what they were a couple of years ago. That defensive coordinator hire from a couple of years ago has really paid off. My questions about Ohio State are physicality, toughness, and quarterback. And the Ohio State fans can cry and bitch and moan and whine and do whatever they want about people calling them soft. It's a self-perpetuating problem that Ohio State has. They continue to do things that reinforce that narrative. The spring game is a great example. Two-hand touch, no tackling in the spring game. Again, does tackling or not tackling in the spring game necessarily mean anything come fall? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But what we do know is that Ohio State is constantly accused of being soft, losing to tougher teams, Michigan, every SEC team they play, right? Go back to their Oregon loss, which is the only other loss they've had. They got pushed around on the line of scrimmage, and Oregon ran for 1,000,000 yards on them. That has been the knock on Ohio State. That and a not-so-good defense. The defense is better. The soft part, I don't know. They lost to Missouri, an SEC team in the bowl game. They lost to Michigan. Before that, they lost to Georgia. Before that, they lost to Michigan again. Until they start beating some of these teams, I think that narrative is going to persist. And when you do things like you did at the spring game, that is only perpetuating that narrative. Again, I'm not suggesting that what happened at Ohio State spring game means that they're going to lose to the SEC because they're not physical, or lose to Michigan at the end of the year, because I'm not suggesting that you can draw a straight line there, but that's where these narratives come from. So the Ohio State fans who seem confused or irritated when those kind of things get mentioned, that's why. Again, don't hate on me. I've got them number one. I think they are the most talented roster, top to bottom, in all of college football heading into 2024. If you look at what they brought back from last year, plus what they added through the portal, they are absolutely loaded at almost every single position group on the field. Again, I do have a question about Will Howard. I don't have a question about whether or not he's good. He's good. Is he great? I don't know. None of us know. I don't think it is. Well, let me ask you this. If you're an Ohio State fan, is he CJ Stroud? Is he Justin Fields? Is he as good as any quarterback you've had in the last 5, 6, 7 years, not named Kyle McCord? No, I don't think he is. Now, can you make that up in other areas? Defensively, toughness, whatever. We'll see. We'll see. But Ohio State's a really good-looking team heading into 2024. Georgia, questions there. Defensive line, that cost them in the Alabama game last year. They didn't do much to address it through the portal. They did bring in a defensive lineman or two, but no huge names. The bigger names went other places. Again, like Ohio State's quarterback situation, Georgia's got good defensive linemen. But do they have Jordan Davis? No. Do they have Jalen Carter? No. Do they have Trayvon Walker? No. They don't have these people. They just don't. They're not as good up front as they were during their 2 national title years. Can they make that up other places? Well, you take a look at the linebackers. I think Georgia's linebacker room may be as good as it's been since maybe the Roquan Smith and then the Kobe Dean days. I'm very high on Georgia's linebackers. The secondary, probably the best or second best safety room in the country. The corners are a question mark. Georgia has had one lockdown corner for sure every year over the last 5, 6, 7 years, going all the way back to DeAndre Baker in 2017 and up through, Keely Ringo and Kamari Lassiter and so forth and so on. They don't appear to have that right now, at least not a returning sort of lockdown first round talent type corner or even maybe second round talent. They've got some young guys. Ellis Robinson comes in. Is he going to be up to speed? Is he going to be good enough to play as a true freshman? We'll see. But so my questions about Georgia, I don't have any questions about Georgia offensively. I think they're going to have one of the best offensive lines in the country. Carson Beck is on the top of every returning quarterback list you look at. At the wide receiver position, they do lose Ladd McConkey, and at the tight end position, they lose Brock Bowers. And while Brock Bowers especially cannot be replaced, Georgia's got two really good tight ends. They're not Brock Bowers. And I love Georgia's wide receiver group as a whole. There's no sort of dominant alpha wide receiver there that's likely to get picked in the first round, but it's a really good group of wide receivers. And they did address that, I think, very well in the offseason through the portal, bringing in a couple of portal wide receivers, particularly Colby Young from Miami, that I think is going to play a lot. He's sort of a body type that Georgia didn't have going into this next season. A sort of a big, tall, lanky guy that can jump, maybe make some catches over the middle, maybe some jump ball situations in the end zone. You pair him with Dominic Lovett, who had a great year last year in Athens. He's back. Dylan Bell is back. There's a large group of what I would call pretty good to very good wide receivers there, although there is no dominant. There's no George Pickens from a couple of years ago. There's no Marvin Harrison or anything like that there, but a good group of wide receivers. Got Georgia at 2. And I've got Texas at 3. And Texas didn't do anything to sort of – there's nothing that went wrong in the spring game. Quinn Ewers hardly played at all, but we've seen him play an entire season. We don't really need to see him play in the spring game. Questions about Texas, they got a bunch of NFL wide receivers to replace, and they got some defensive linemen that are off to the NFL to replace. Those are the two biggest questions to me. I think they'll be good along the offensive line. I like their running back situation, especially if they can stay healthy, which was an issue last year. I obviously like Quinn Ewers a lot. And they've got Arch Manning now as QB2. The other guy, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Malik Murphy, who I really like, by the way, transferred out. Arch Manning, the clear-cut number 2, though, and he put on a show at the spring game. Now, we're not going to see Arch Manning play any meaningful time this year unless Quinn Ewers gets injured. Again, something that has happened to him a couple of times over the course of his career. So something to keep an eye on there. But my questions about Texas are primarily along the defensive line and the transition to the SEC and what effect, if any, will that have on them over the course of the season. But I'm not knocking Texas, Ohio State, or Georgia really here. You're talking about rich people problems when you're talking about questions about Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State. I think those are clearly the 3 best teams heading into the season. I left Oregon at 4 and Notre Dame at 5. I really like what Dan Lanning is doing up there at Oregon. He's building what appears to be an SEC team on the West Coast. Stanford used to do this, but not at this talent level. Stanford, David Shaw, until his last year or so there, was a line of scrimmage, ground and pound. He recruited NFL offensive and defensive linemen there and always had an NFL running back. Oregon is the talent level at Oregon is way beyond anything David Shaw was ever doing at Oregon, but it kind of reminds me of that kind of style. Now, they lose, of course, Bo Nix at quarterback, but they bring in Dylan Gabriel through the transfer portal, who had an unbelievable year last year as the quarterback at Oklahoma. More on them in a few minutes. He transferred out of Norman to Oregon. They also brought in Dante Moore from UCLA, who was a true freshman last year, who originally was committed to Oregon and then flipped to UCLA at the last minute. Played a little bit last year for Chip Kelly at UCLA, but not much, and now transfers up to Oregon. So they appear to have their quarterback situation settled not only for this year, but going forward. Dan Lanning's an elite-level recruiter, both high school and portal. Their defense looks like an SEC defense. I think Oregon is going to be really, really good. And of the 4 teams that are transitioning from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, obviously, as you can see from the rankings, I think Oregon's got the best chance to succeed early there. Now, they play a home game against Ohio State early in the year, which is going to be a monster game for both teams. And a big advantage there for Oregon that they get that one at home. I've got Notre Dame at 5. I have a feeling people are going to say all the same things they always say about Notre Dame, and honestly, some of the things that I sometimes have said about Notre Dame. But I feel like they were true when I said them in the past, and maybe not so much now. I like Notre Dame's wide receiver situation. That has not always been the case. That has been one of their biggest weaknesses over the last 10 or 15 years. They've always had good lines of scrimmage, some good tight ends. They've played good defense over the years, and from time to time, they've even had pretty good quarterbacks. But they have really struggled at the skill positions, especially when they match up with other top 5 teams. And that's reflected in their bowl record. If you look at Notre Dame's record in the regular season versus the postseason, it's a night and day difference, especially when Notre Dame gets matched up with any of the top programs from year to year. Sort of famously or infamously, Notre Dame is like 0-11 in their last major, in their last 11, I think it's 11, might be 12, major postseason games. So by major postseason games, I'm talking about conference championships. They did play in one of those in 2020. They got beat by Clemson. BCS national championship game back in 2012, blown out by Alabama. Every single New Year's Six game they've ever appeared in, lost. Every single playoff game they've ever appeared in, lost. And the average margin of victory has been over average margin of defeat for Notre Dame in those major postseason games have been over 3 touchdowns. They have really struggled against elite competition. New coaching staff there going into their 3rd year. I don't guess it's not technically new anymore, Marcus Freeman, but they're trying their best to address that. They have also been using the portal, most notably at the quarterback position. And I like Notre Dame's chances this year. Southern Cal, I think, is in a little bit of a down window. Caleb Williams is gone. Now, Lincoln Riley's always going to have a good quarterback, but what are the chances Lincoln Riley's offense at Southern Cal, minus Caleb Williams, is going to be as good as it was last year this coming year? It's probably not. It's still going to be a good offense, and we'll see what they do defensively. They swear, Lincoln Riley swears he's fixing the defense and he knows what's wrong there, but I've heard that song and dance from him before. Point is, that game doesn't look as hard anymore as it used to. Now, they do have to play, I believe, Clemson this year. They got some tough games on their schedule, but we're in a 12-team playoff now, right? So the question about Notre Dame that I have really is not so much about their team or their schedule. It's what record do you think Notre Dame needs to make the playoffs? Now, remember, they avoid a 13th game, so they avoid potentially another loss that a lot of teams that are trying to get into the playoffs in late November, early December are going to be forced to play in. Not forced might not be the right word, but if you play in a conference, in other words, let's say Notre Dame is 10-2, okay? And some other, just pick any other random team is also 10-2, but that other random 10-2 team plays in a conference championship game and loses. And it comes down to putting Notre Dame into the playoffs at 10-2, or that team that had to play a 13th game in at 10-3. Who gets in? I don't know what would happen in that scenario. I would put the 3-loss team in over Notre Dame, especially if that 3-loss team, that 3rd loss came to, let's say, a top 2 or 3 ranked Georgia in the SEC championship game, or a top 2 or 3 ranked Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. If that's where that 3rd loss came from, while Notre Dame is sitting on the sidelines, but busy not playing a 13th game because they're scared to join a conference. So me personally, Notre Dame's got to be 11-1 if I'm putting them in my 12-team playoff. Not sure what approach the committee will take, but you need to keep those kinds of things in mind when you're talking about Notre Dame's chances to make the playoffs. The 4-playoff deal is gone. The days of having to go undefeated or maybe being able to get in with 1 loss or whatever, those days are gone. You're going to have a lot of 1- and 2-loss teams getting in the playoffs. Notre Dame, avoiding a 13th game, where's that benchmark for them? But I like them this year. I think they're going to be a good team. And so the top 5 was the same. Michigan. I moved Michigan up to 6. I had them at 8. My questions about Michigan were quarterback and running back, really. I mean, they lose one running back, they get the other one back, right? Blake Corum gone to the NFL, but they get Donovan Edwards back. I didn't really have my quarterback questions about Michigan answered during their spring game. Alex Orji is sort of who most people think will be the guy there. He struggles to throw the ball. The backup there looked way better in the spring game. Now, again, the spring game is 1 2-hour window that we get to watch, okay? Michigan's coaches have watched those 2 quarterbacks play in every single practice and every single scrimmage and all that. So they have seen way more than we've seen. But in that one sample size that we saw, Orji struggled to throw the ball, particularly downfield in the 10, 15, 20-yard range. And the other guy was on the money. Now, Orji brings a whole other set of problems for opposing defenses with what he can do with his legs. He's like Jalen Milroe in that way. He can take off for 80 yards at any time. But I don't know if he's I don't know if he can play the position of quarterback well enough for Michigan to be as good of a team again in 2024 as they were in 2023. Now, their defense is going to be lights out, and it's going to keep them in almost, if not every single game they play. They get a ton back over there, and they've recruited really well over there. But the coaching staff is gone. Jim Harbaugh is gone. Sharon Moore elevated to head coach there. And while he did coach a few games last year while Harbaugh was suspended, he's never really been in charge of a program before. So first real test this season for Sharon Moore, head coach at Michigan. I think they're going to be really, really good. I would put them third in the Big Ten right now if I were to rank the Big Ten behind Ohio State and Oregon. Doesn't mean they can't beat one or both of those teams. But right now, I've just got more question marks about Michigan heading into next season than I do Ohio State or Oregon. I know Michigan's beat Ohio State 3 years in a row. I know they've won the Big Ten 3 years in a row. I know they've made the playoffs however many years in a row. And I know they won the national title last year and were undefeated, and they deserve congratulations for all of those things. But this is 2024, and this is how I feel about them right now. So I moved them, but I did move them up from 8 to 6. I think their defense is going to be a problem. Alabama, I left at 7. They did not look good in their spring game outside of their ability to run the ball. They may have the best running game in all of college football this year. Jam Miller, Haynes, what's the Haynes kid's name? And the Young. Those three, Miller, Haynes, and Young, looked unbelievable at the running back position. Might be the best running football team in the country. You add that to what we know Jalen Milroe can do with his legs and his ability to hit a home run, with his legs, with his feet. And I think they could have the best run game in the country. I still have the same questions about Jalen Milroe's ability to throw the ball that I had last year. He's a lot like Orji in that way. He's got a great deep ball. He's very athletic. He can move. He can extend plays. I still think he struggles to read defenses, to progress through his reads, to make the 10, 15, 20-yard kind of out route or crossing routes. I still think that's a problem. I would be nervous every single time Milroe dropped back to throw the ball on 3rd and 8 if I'm a Bama fan. Same with Michigan. And their defense did not look great in the spring game. Again, this is a 2-hour window we're seeing of basically Alabama's practice that occurred over a 6-week period, and we get to see 2 hours of it. Maybe they looked great at other times. Maybe Milroe played better at other times. So as far as what we got to see, the defense looked bad, and Milroe looked not much better than what he did last year. I love the running backs. Bernard, who transferred down to the wide receiver position from Washington, played really well in that spring game. Colby Prentice, is that his name? Had a couple of big plays. But I'm going to be curious to see with Saban gone and DeBoer there, and we saw what DeBoer did last year with Michael Penix. It was a lot of throwing the ball, not a lot of running the ball there. How stubborn and hard-headed is he to kind of his philosophy of offense? Because if he tries to turn Jalen Milroe into, I don't think Jalen Milroe can be turned into Michael Penix. I don't think Jalen Milroe has the arm talent that Michael Penix has. I don't think Jalen Milroe has the ability to play the quarterback position at the level that Michael Penix did. Now, he's better than Michael Penix from the waist down with his legs, and I really love Alabama's running back, so I'm curious to see what approach DeBoer takes there. Does he try to turn Alabama into a running team? I think that's probably their best bet, but we'll see what they decide to do. But they're going to have one of the most talented rosters in the country again. They did lose a few pieces through the portal there when Saban left, but they've added some pieces. They're going to be tough for anybody they play. There's no question about it. Let's see. I've got Ole Miss at 8. So basically, I swapped Michigan and Ole Miss. Ole Miss lost Quinshon Judkins, and that's a big loss. If you look at what Ole Miss has been able to do over the last couple of years, they've really been a running team. Lane Kiffin sort of has this narrative that floats around that he's kind of like this high-flying offense type of thing. They've been a running team. And I think they're going to be a running team again in 2024, but without Quinshon Judkins, I wonder if they're going to be able to run the ball at the level they did, particularly last year. They've struggled on defense, especially in big games. They are to the point, at least it seems, where they are able to beat the teams they're supposed to beat. And that might sound like common sense, but that doesn't happen very often in college football. Think about whatever team you're a fan of. How many times in a year do they lose a game that they probably should win? Like, it happens a lot. If you look at Ole Miss, it happened a lot to them until last year. Last year, they seemed to get over that hurdle. They beat everybody they were supposed to beat. Problem is, they lost to everybody they were supposed to lose to. They went 10-2 with losses to Georgia and Alabama. And the Alabama loss in particular was concerning. That was early in the year. Milroe was not playing well. Alabama was coming off that disastrous performance on the road at South Florida, where honestly they should have lost that game. It looked like Alabama was primed for the knockout blow. And Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss showed up in Tuscaloosa and couldn't get a first down in the second half and lost the game 24-10. Then later, they won the rest of their games against everybody they were supposed to beat. Then they rolled into Athens late in the year in November and got beat by 30 or 40 points, whatever it was. They did win their bowl game, but again, we can argue or debate about how much that means or doesn't. But I moved them down to 8 from 6. I still think they've got a shot to be like the third playoff team out of the SEC. Not sure Ole Miss can win or even play for the SEC championship this year, but I think they've got a chance to be a third team from the SEC that gets in if the SEC were to get 3 teams in. I've got Oklahoma State at 9. Move them up some. I like what they've got going on there, and the reality is the Big 12 is just, with Texas and Oklahoma gone, the Big 12 is just not what it used to be. There are less hurdles to jump over every year in the Big 12 now than there has been in the past. I mean, you can see right here, Texas is ranked way ahead of them. Doesn't matter, at least not in terms of winning the Big 12. And again, to get back to the new playoff format, if whoever wins the Big 12 is 9-4, they're getting in the playoffs. It doesn't matter what they end up being ranked in somebody's top 25. If they go 9-4, win the Big 12 championship game, they're getting in. And that could happen. They've got one of the best returning running backs in all of college football in Ollie Gordon. They got to keep him healthy. And they've got to be more consistent. You look at the last 2 years for Oklahoma State. 2 years ago, started out the first half of the season really good. Couldn't win a game the second half of the season. It was really bad. Last season starts. They started out 2-2, just terrible losses. And then they won the rest of their games and finished, 10-3, 10-2, whatever it was. They've got to just be more consistent over the course of the season. But Mike Gundy's been there forever. They feel like one of the favorites to win the sort of reinvented Big 12 this year. I've got them at 9. Got Utah at 10, most consistently good program really in the country over the last 15 years under Kyle Whittingham. He's guided them from the group of 5 into the Power 5, the Pac-12, formerly of the Pac-12. He won the Pac-12 2 of the last 3 years. Now, last year was a down year for Utah, but he had a ton of injuries, primarily their quarterback Cam Rising, who ended up having to sit out the entire year. He's back for his 100th year or whatever it is this year, and they're going to be one of the most well-coached teams in the country. You already know that. And again, look at their path. Who do they play that they can't just... Is there anybody Utah plays that you would go, there's just no way they're winning that game? I mean, just think about the teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Kansas, Arizona. Who of those teams do you look at and you go, there's no way Utah's winning that one? They're going to have a chance in every game they play. Again, will they win them all? Probably not. But you're not going to have to win them all. The 4-team playoff is gone. 12-team playoff. The winner of the Big 12 is getting in. Doesn't matter whether they're 13-0 with a Big 12 title or 9-4 with a Big 12 title. Either way, the Big 12 is getting somebody into playoffs. It might be Utah. I've got Missouri at 11. I am falling on Mizzou. Doing it for 1 year is great. I need to see a team do it more than once. You look at Ole Miss and Mizzou, they get compared a lot. Mizzou's had a couple of pretty good years under Lane Kiffin, 8+ wins, and then last year the pop year with the 10 or 11 wins. Drinkwitz is a 500 coach until last year. Literally a 500 or a losing record. He's been 6-6 or 6-7 or 5-7, right around there every single year he's ever been a coach at Missouri. And then last year happens. And last year was a great year, 10-2 in the regular season, win over Ohio State in a New Year's Six game, 11-2. Their quarterback is back. They lose the best player on the team, though, that running back. They've got a couple of 5-stars, most notably Luther Burton at the wide receiver position. They got a true freshman, too, Nwaneri or whatever his name is, Nweri. I don't know. I don't name these people. So they've got a couple of pieces there. Drinkwitz proved last year that he can put a really good team on the field. My question about Missouri outside of any of their players or position groups is, can they do it 2 years in a row? You know, I don't know. Whatever you think about the SEC, it's tough for anybody to win 10, 11 games 2 years in a row in the SEC. It's going to be particularly tough for a team with Missouri's talent level to do it. And when you look at the SEC and you stack up the rosters, Missouri is where on the talent list? 10? I mean, I can name a lot of teams right now that just have a more talented roster than Missouri. Again, talent isn't all that matters. They've got to produce. You got to put them in the right situations to win, and Drinkwitz gets credit for doing all those things last year. But until you do it 2 years in a row, you know, is Missouri TCU? I mean, I know Missouri didn't make the national title game, but you know what I mean, right? TCU's a 7-8 win team, aren't they? Yeah, they made a national title game 2 years ago. That's great. Where were they at last year? They were busy getting beat by Colorado in week 1. Is that what Missouri is? Or is Missouri going to win 10-plus games again and give themselves a shot at the playoffs? I feel like even ranking Missouri at 11, some people are probably going to get upset at that. They say, oh, it's not high enough. That seems like a pretty big compliment to me, to have Missouri ranked 11 in a preseason ranking. I've got Kansas State at 12. I think they could be one of the biggest surprises of the year. First of all, I admit I'm biased. I absolutely love their coaching staff. I think they might have one of the most underrated coaching staffs in the country. And they just got Dylan Edwards from Colorado. And you're going to say, well, Colorado's terrible. Dylan Edwards was pretty good. Just mentioned that TCU game, scored 4 touchdowns in that game. Now, Colorado's problems had nothing to do with Dylan Edwards. It was offensive philosophy and scheme and Dion meddling in shit that he had no business meddling in and trying to prop his kids up and make them look good. And Dylan Edwards got pushed to the wayside. Now he lands at Kansas State. Think about who Kansas State had at running back a couple of years ago. Deuce Vaughn. Guy this tall, now he's in the NFL. Dylan Edwards is basically a Deuce Vaughn clone. Now, he's not as thick as Deuce Vaughn, and I'm not saying he's as good as Deuce Vaughn either, but he's the exact same type of running back that they had there a couple of years ago when Deuce Vaughn just absolutely went nuts. They were a good team last year. They got a lot coming back. I love their quarterback. He looked unbelievable in the bowl game. Kansas State could be a team that could shock some people this year. Maybe they're this year's TCU. Maybe they run the table in a revamped Big 12 and end up in the playoffs, but I really like Kansas State. I've got LSU at 13. They're the most talented, disappointing team in the country last year to me. That defense came out of nowhere. I don't care how much you hate LSU or Brian Kelly or whatever else. There ain't a person alive that thought LSU's defense was going to be that bad last year. Now, I knew they had some question marks about the secondary heading into the season. They had tried to go into the portal, and they were playing a bunch of first-year starters in the secondary, and I wondered how well that would hold up, but I did not see last year coming. Now, look, Jaden Daniels in the offense was unbelievable, and now all those guys are in the NFL. Their offense is not going to be as good in 2024 as it was in 2023. They better make that up defensively, or they're going to be in for a similar season record-wise to what they had last year, even if the defense is a little bit better. That defense has got to get a lot better. I like Nussmeier at quarterback, but he's not Jaden Daniels. He's just not. Is there another Malik Neighbors on that team? We'll find out. Now, they're one of the most talented teams in the country, and if they can get it all together and it works, they're going to be a dangerous team every single week. But a lot of questions there after what I saw last year on the defense and then knowing what all they've lost offensively. But I've got them at 13. Miami is one of the biggest movers in my top 25, and I can't believe I'm doing this to myself. I am impressed with what they've done in the portal. I'm not surprised. I mean, I think anybody with any common sense predicted that this is what would happen 2 years ago when they hired Mario Cristobal. Their talent level, wherever it was at, was about to get way higher. And that's exactly what has happened over the last 2 years. Now, like everybody else, because I keep seeing this pointed out, yeah, they brought in a lot of talent, but they've had people transfer out. Everybody has had people transfer out. It's not fair to hold that against Mario as a negative. It happens to everybody. I mean, Alabama lost the best safety in the country. Starting quarterbacks are transferring. I mean, it's just the wild, wild west in terms of transfers. But they continue to bring in elite talent, both at the high school level and through the transfer portal. Now, his coaching ability, in the toilet. And he doesn't have the I'm a young coach who doesn't know what I'm doing excuse anymore. Kirby made some boneheaded, dumbass decisions in 2016 and 2017. That was his first 2 years as a head coach, okay? Maybe you give Mario Cristobal the benefit of the doubt for some of the dumb shit he did at Oregon, particularly in that Stanford game. There's no excuse for what happened last year in the Georgia Tech game, and there's some other things to point to as well. Some coaching hires that maybe you can question, although I do like the staff he's put together, and some in-game decision-making thing above and beyond just the end of that Georgia Tech game. He's got to start being better on Saturdays. Eventually, the, well, he's a great recruiter line is just going to start to wear thin. It just is. But that being said, Clemson, I think, is still swimming upstream, trying to get back to what they were 6, 7, 8 years ago. Florida State, we'll talk about it in a minute, but they lose basically every player from last year's team that anybody can name. There's just no way they're going to be as good as they were last year. And are they going to go back to winning 6 games? No. But are they going 13-0? No, they're not. And neither is Miami. But I think Miami, Clemson, Florida State, and you see I got Virginia Tech and Louisville down there at 22 or 25. One of those 5 teams in my mind is winning the ACC, and it won't surprise me if it's any of those 5. But anyway, I've got Miami at 14. Oklahoma at 15. Again, their defense has just got to get a lot better. They're transitioning from the Big 12 to the SEC, and their defense was horrendous last year. I'm not getting into it. I'm so sick and tired of arguing with Oklahoma fans. It can be dark outside, and the Oklahoma fans will tell you the sun is shining. Over there on their defensive side of the ball. Their defense was horrendous. Their offense was unbelievable. Dylan Gabriel was a Heisman candidate. They couldn't wait to run him out of town. Same thing with the offensive coordinator. It's the weirdest thing. It's like it's Brent. You know what it is? It's Brent Venables' derangement syndrome. They are so stuck on this idea of Brent Venables being a defensive genius, which he was at Clemson, that they can't wrap their minds around the idea that Brent Venables' team has a bad defense. Well, hey, I'm here to tell you, Brent Venables' team's had a bad defense the last 2 years, and you've been carried by your offense. Now, Dylan Gabriel and that offensive coordinator is gone, right? Jackson Arnold comes in. We ain't never seen him do nothing outside of last year's bowl game when all he did was throw the ball to the other team. They got to get a lot better. A lot better. They host Tennessee in week 4. If they lose that game, it's going to be a long season. If they lose that game at home, it's going to be a long season. I've got Oklahoma at 15. Penn State at 16. I mean, I'm going the opposite way on them. I'm just not buying into them anymore. And you probably say, well, I could probably do the same thing about Miami. I'd have to go back. I don't know where I had Miami ranked last preseason. Somebody can tell me down below. But I've never picked Miami to win the ACC championship, first of all. So, lose wrong on Miami every year. I've never picked Miami to win the ACC. I don't even think I've ever picked Penn State to win the Big Ten. But last year, I did expect them to beat one of the big two, Michigan or Ohio State. And once again, they come out and they can't get a first down against either one. I'm sick of seeing it. Now, the Big Ten is new. Penn State's schedule has changed. They don't have to play them both anymore, I don't think. But Drew Allard did not impress anybody last year at quarterback, not me. I expected a lot more from him. They've got great running backs, great line of scrimmage, and they play good defense. Oh, breaking news. They've been doing that every single year for a decade while they're busy not even making the Big Ten championship game outside of 2016. Penn State's got a shit or get off the pot. I'm tired of defending James Franklin. I'm tired of talking about all these players that Penn State has at the running back and how this quarterback's finally going to be the one and blah, blah, blah. I'm tired of doing it. Beat somebody ranked in the top 10. I've got Clemson at 17. They might finish the season unranked. Their quarterback situation is a mess. Cade Clement doesn't know what he's doing. He turns the ball over. Everybody on that offense turns the ball over. Dabo Swinney's hard-headed, got his head in the sand when it comes to the portal and NIL and everything else. He won't bring anybody in. They got no center. They don't have a wide receiver anybody can name. The defense is going to get steadily worse every single year now that Venables is gone. I don't know what else to say about Clemson. They play Georgia week 1, and they're going to get their doors blown off. Tennessee at 18. Big question mark to me for Tennessee. I think Tennessee could finish the season unranked. I think Tennessee could finish the season in the top 10 and in the playoffs. And it's going to come down to Nico and the defense. I think they're going to have a really good run game again. I like their wide receivers. Couple of questions about the offensive line. They've got one of, if not the best defensive players in the country that no one ever talks about. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the draft next year. The secondary, the offensive line, and Nico. How good or bad are those 3 units going to be? Because that's going to determine how far Tennessee goes in 2024. Primarily, of course, Nico. Now, they still play Bama, but they get them at home. They got to go to Georgia. Those are 2 tough games. They also play on the road at Oklahoma early in the year. And I believe their first or second game of the year is a neutral site game against NC State, who's ranked in my ranking. Are they? No. Where is it? Yeah, 19. And they're ranked inside the top 20 or 25 in every single ranking you see. To me, if Tennessee starts out 4-0 with wins against NC State and on the road at Oklahoma, they're probably making the playoffs at 10-2 or better. If they don't start 4-0, then it becomes a crapshoot. They probably got to win one of those games at home against Bama, on the road at Georgia, some kind of quality win. We'll see. But that game at Oklahoma is huge for both Oklahoma and Tennessee in my mind. But I've got them at 18. NC State at 19, return a lot from last year's team. Dave Doran seems to bump his head on 8 or 9 wins every single year, can't get over the hump. The years he beats Clemson, he loses 2 other games for no reason. But, again, Florida State, not as good as they were last year, in my opinion. Clemson still struggling to find answers offensively. Why not NC State? I don't know. Why not? Florida State at 20, talked about them already. Kansas at 21, another team. 9-4 last year, and no one mentions it. Kansas was 9-4. Kansas. That coach there, I talked about how much I like climbing at Kansas State, and put Leopold on that list too at Kansas. Unbelievable job he's done there. Just absolutely unbelievable. And if I was him, I'd get the hell out of there sooner rather than later. First of all, you're in the Big 12. Now, I hope the Big 12 stays around forever and is here 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But there's no guarantee that's going to be the case. Second of all, even if it is around, you're never getting where you want to go as the head coach of Kansas. You're just not. Matt Campbell had an opportunity to get out of Iowa State a few years ago. He didn't do it. Now he's stuck there forever. Nobody wants him. If I'm this guy at Kansas, I'm getting out of there. If an SEC or a Big Ten school comes calling, I'm leaving Kansas. I think he's a hell of a coach. Louisville at 22. I'm going to be honest. I'm having a hard time buying into Louisville again, but I didn't want to look like as big of an idiot as I did last year. I refused to rank Louisville for almost the entire season. And then you turn around and they're sitting on 2 or 3 losses and they're playing for the ACC title. And they got a lot coming back, and some people are predicting them to be back in the ACC championship game again. So I just don't want to look like a fool, so I'm putting them at 22. Arizona, one of the most exciting players in all of college football, that quarterback, Fatiti or whatever his name is. Again, I don't name these people. So if I say their name wrong, that's not on me, that's on them. They spent their whole life coming up with the hardest name possible to pronounce and then get mad when people pronounce it wrong. That's ridiculous. But they got a brand new coaching staff there, and again, transitioning into a new league. So we'll see on them. But watch some Arizona this year if you didn't last year. That quarterback's a lot of fun to watch. Iowa at 24 finally got rid of nepotism as the offensive coordinator, bringing in an actual offensive coordinator. How much will it matter? We'll see. The defense will probably be really good again. That's been the case there. But until they can score more than 12 points a game, it's hard to rank them higher than 24 or so. And then Virginia Tech at 25 is sort of the flyer that I'm taking. Virginia Tech has no real reason or business finishing in the top 25 or even being ranked in the top 25. They haven't done anything in a lot of people's lifetime. You got to go back to the early 2000s, really, to find the last period of time where they were consistently good, kind of the Mike Vick years there at the end of the Frank Beamer tenure. And they've been disappointing lately. But I really like the way they finished the season last year. The last half of the season was really good for them. And they've got, I think they might be number 1, but I know they're top 5 in terms of returning production from last year's team. And again, before you start making record predictions, not just for Virginia Tech, but for any team, you have really got to look at the schedules. Schedules as they have existed for my lifetime are gone. They're gone in the SEC. They're gone in the ACC, the Big Ten. There's no divisions anywhere anymore. These teams have 16, 17, 18 teams. Teams you used to play every year. Now you only play every 3 years. Teams you never played before. Now you're playing them home and home every other year, whatever. You got to look at these schedules. Virginia Tech has a manageable schedule when it comes to the ACC this year. So there you go. That's my updated top 25. Be sure and let me know down below where you disagree. Have a good morning.